Hello, welcome to Art Talk, the place where we agree to disagree if we disagree at all. Today we have a very hot topic, masculine male vulnerability. Our guest is Arno Greta from Switzerland. Hello, Arno. Welcome to Art Talks.
Hi, René. Great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You're very welcome. It's unusual. I'm sitting outdoors. I'm in Greece. We had a heat wave. Actually, let me turn the camera. Maybe you see the moon, the full moon. Just a second.
Wow, amazing.
It was a very, very hot day today here in Greece. We did have a heat wave, as I said. And here, this is a good place for me to be in the camera. And it's a heat wave, and I went a lot of swimming, and I thought a lot about our topic we have tonight, vulnerability, masculine or male vulnerability. I wonder how we ever got to this minefield of a topic, but we'll get there. I first would like to introduce you, Arno. Actually, I normally do that, introducing my guest, and it's almost a measure of control. And our topic is vulnerability, which I think has to do also with letting go of control. So rather than me telling the viewer who you are, why don't you introduce yourself? I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about you.
Wow, thank you for the question. I did not expect this. So, yes, I'm Arno. I'm 50-year-old man. I would say happy man, living in the most beautiful city of Switzerland, which is obviously Lucerne. And basically, I married with one child, a grown-up child, and working for almost 28 years for the same company, which is Swiss Re, Swiss reinsurance company. And basically, there I love the international business. I have a lot collaboration with people around the globe in Switzerland, in India, in Slovakia, and other places, and really, really excited about this cultural interaction and yes, somehow learning new things every day. And I guess that kept me for that long time with that beautiful company.
Thank you. I also know that you love the nature, you love to be outdoors, you're a wonderful father. And I've enjoyed talking to you, working with you so intensely for the last few years. So you are not an anthropologist, neither am I. Neither of us is a psychologist or a sociologist, and we're got to talk about vulnerability. Actually, it was in an email you sent to me where this word appeared, and I instantly picked up on it, and I thought that might be interesting, and it might be interesting to put it in context with us being two men and talking about this topic. Now, doing some research on male or masculine vulnerability, I'm really not sure which one I should say, and they don't mean the same thing. But we don't need to nitpick on the terminology about these things. But when I looked into it and researched a little bit, I thought, gee, it's a real hot potato. It would almost be easier to talk about toxic masculinity or toxic manhood, which are catchwords today in the light of the Me Too movement and with a lot of the things which have gone wrong over the century under the dictate of patriarchy. Vulnerability, when you use that terminology, can you tell me a little bit? What can you remember when you said that to me? And maybe you even want to talk about the context. I have a few blocks, very loosely. What does it mean to be a man? Transition, and is vulnerability a strength, or is that yet again another paradox or even a belief system? So we will go from one of these blocks to the other, but let me first hear a little bit from you about vulnerability, your take on it.
Yes, thank you. And maybe let me start with a short story. Yeah. So it was last week, already a bit the topic of vulnerability in mind. I was driving my car to the office in Zurich and listening to one of these beautiful ballades of Leonard Cohen. And basically in the chorus, I heard the text, "There is a crack in everything, and that is where the light shines in." And I said, it was early morning, and I said, wow, this guy talks about vulnerability. So I think in my interpretation, basically the crack in everything, the crack in the armor we sometimes wear when we go to the office, the crack in the mask we sometimes wear, that's the vulnerability. That is where the light shines in. That is basically where people see your emotions, maybe sometimes even see your heart. So that is a bit my definition of vulnerability.
Yeah, in fact, in some of the conversations I had with you, you used the terminology "speaking from the heart," which I believe is something you just picked up on. I would like to show you a short video. It's just a minute and a half. And dear viewers, be patient with me. I'm improvising here in Greece with sharing my screen. I don't have the equipment as I do normally at home. But be patient and let's see whether this works. I would like to make this full screen too, so you have a better viewing. There we go.
So I'm Liam, and I'd like us to welcome back Heartfelt Men. And I'd like us to start today by busting some myths about masculinity that I learned as a boy. These myths have plagued my life and ruined my relationships for far too long. And maybe they've done the same to yours. So it's time they went away. Here they are. Vulnerability is weak, feelings are feminine, and your feelings are my responsibility. So I want to share a real story of what life is like when you believe these myths. It's my story. When I was a little boy, I was pretty happy and I was pretty lucky. I was born into all of the privilege of being a straight white boy in a loving family in a first world country. For a long time, my greatest challenge was, should I ride my BMX? Should I play video games? Or should I play soccer? I had great friends that I was close to. I was good at school. I was happy. Life was pretty good. As a boy, like most boys, I expressed my emotions freely. I laughed, I yelled, I sobbed, I cried. But when I was about 9 years old, something changed. As a little boy, I learned that I was no longer allowed to have feelings. I was no longer allowed to cry. I was no longer allowed to care too much. Boys and girls, men and women, taught me the price of disobeying these rules. Fag, pussy, sissy, weak. Grow some balls.
So this, some of the catchwords which you actually used came here in this. And I think if we talk about vulnerability, we need to go back. Male vulnerability, we need to go back and start from the beginning, how we came to be men and how we define manhood or being masculine. And actually, I want to show you another picture, having shared my screen successfully. Let me try again to do this. And this is mainly for the viewer.
I know the guy. That was a different life, maybe.
Yes, you do know this guy. And of course, what I showed to the viewer was a picture of yourself. And I remember that one of the stories you told me was that when you were that young man and when this picture was actually taken, you were journeying. Now, I believe it was Franz Kafka who once said, when a boy turns to a man, he travels east. That certainly, as I found out in hindsight, that certainly was true in my life. I undertook a major journey, a physical journey, where I traveled actually all the way to Asia, to Singapore, for a year and a half in a very adventurous way. And somehow I think that maybe your journey also, where I showed the picture, was somewhat of a transition from boyhood, which was also shown by this man in the TED Talk, who was talking about being a child, being able to cry, then becoming what people call a man. Don't show emotions, keep control, and things like that. And this transition period is an important part in our lives. And I suspect that part of that transition was also when you went on that trip. Tell us a little bit about it.
About the trip?
Yeah, and how much of it was transition for you, whether it was, and with transition, I mean entering a stage of becoming a grown-up, being in charge of your own life, taking a certain degree of risks also, leaving the protection of your home and exposing yourself.
Yeah, and maybe just before I go into this, a couple of words to what this other man was talking about. And I guess when I talk about my childhood, I can 100% relate to what the guy was talking about. With 9-year-old, when you were 9-year-old, you were told to be a man. So yes, exactly. That was, I guess, that's what's the cultural setting of the 60s and 70s when we were growing up. Luckily, I guess in my family, it was a bit different. I was still am the youngest of 4 children, so I had kind of the free ticket, and I never really felt that pressure of playing a role of a man, so I was crying a lot, and I guess I was always rewarded by mother when I cried. So that was a positive experience in my childhood when I showed this kind of emotions. I guess the journey, which yes, it was a journey from Switzerland to the east to Israel. And I decided to really do it, not just, I guess it would have been very easy to do it by train or by plane. I decided to do it with hitchhiking. So thumb up like this and really getting there. So I guess I expressed this towards a colleague and told him, listen, I'm traveling after my apprenticeship. I'm traveling to Israel because I want to explore a different life there. And know what? I do it with hitchhiking. And he said, I'm joining you. I'm joining you. So maybe I was then also talking with my heart, big dreams, and so on. And I guess, yes, we came to Venice. We even came to the border of Yugoslavia. But then after, in Yugoslavia, in the 80s, so communist state still, there was no car, there was no nothing. And so after half a day, I basically said, well, maybe we need to compromise on our vision, so let's take the train. So that was maybe kind of a reality check. And then, yes, we took the train from, I guess it was Split in Yugoslavia to Thessaloniki in Greece. And then we had to change from train to bus in Istanbul. And my plan was then to cross the border in Cyprus and go to the Greek parts of Cyprus and directly to Israel. So that was the vision, that was the plan. And reality, once again, taught me something different, because there was really a fence in the middle through Cyprus, and there was no crossing, absolutely no crossing, young Swiss guys. So we had to go back all the way from Cyprus to Turkey. We were traveling along the southern coast, beautiful southern coast of Turkey. It was in those days not a lot of tourists there, but beautiful place. And we came back to Athens, took the ferry down to Israel. So when I took big risks on that travel, in the sense that I was just following my dreams, and I had to learn maybe sometimes a bit the hard way, that yes, reality is something different. And in that sense, yes, I guess that travel, that journey taught me a couple of really good lessons.
Interesting elements in this story, as you said, following the vision, following the dream, and then there's a reality check. Life doesn't always play the way we had planned it, and then we need to abandon a strategy and adapt to the circumstances to find a new way, but still following the dream, still following the ultimate goal. And talking about vulnerability in my life, what I found very difficult was to accept my own shortcomings, my own failures. So oftentimes these changes, as you have just described them, they can actually be perceived as a failure. So I had I did my long trip was 1.5 years on a motorbike. And in Delhi, I got malaria and I was very weak. And yet I wanted to continue and I wanted to go across to Malaysia. So I actually took a train from New Delhi. And this is the first time I tell this publicly. I put my motorbike on a train all the way to Madras, which is practically the whole Indian subcontinent, where I then went by ferry across and continued my journey there. But this adoption in my journey, like you described, that it didn't work, Cyprus was closed, I considered it as a failure. So I actually kept this very much secret. And I find that men are often, or rather should I say boys, when they come into that adulthood, which the TED Talk man was speaking about, they often are primed and programmed with certain beliefs how they should behave, and that a real man never fails. He only succeeds. He only shows strength. He always is the protector. Then later in life, we maybe get exposed to certain psychological knowledge, the psychologist C.G. Jung with the anima and animus, and yet again we are in these role plays. And I found that one sign of vulnerability in a positive sense is when we find the courage and the strength and the confidence to actually admit, particularly to another man, shortcomings, our fears, our failures, and so on. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree, and maybe give you also my example. So I guess then this other side of vulnerability, or let me put it away, the invulnerability. So man demonstrating invulnerability. I crossed this, I experienced this more than in my business life, where there was a clear expectation towards me, or I at least perceived this as a clear expectation as a young team leader, that I behave in a certain way. Yeah? So that I basically have answers to all the questions because I'm the team leader. So a team leader, you tell me, yeah? Or that I do not show emotions, that I'm a tough cookie. Yeah? So this kind of mindset in behavioral expectations I experienced more than in the business life. And I guess just to say also there, I guess a lot is changing in business now as well.
Yeah, actually, this is how we got to talk about vulnerability in the first place, because the email you sent was in context with, I believe, if I remember correctly, with a business situation. And the man's movement, if there is such a thing, I know that the term exists, but I don't want to categorize too strongly. But consciousness in men who want to who have to tackle with the expectations, with the form, with the programming they've received. And when they discover that they want to transcend that and explore new behaviors, that is something I believe that the modern business world maybe is doing more so than the generally people think. I used to be in commodity trade. There's a lot of stereotypes about the financiers, the Wall Street ideas, and the managers, the executives. And listening to you over the last few years, you used terminologies like empathy. You were talking about soft skills, that kind of thing, which showed that there is in the business world an opening up, allowing emotions, allowing vulnerability, our catchword here tonight. Tell me a little bit more about this, please, Arno.
Yes, sure. I'm happy to do so. So you're absolutely right. I guess expectation on a leader today is, on the one hand side, that the person is empathic, really being close to the people, understand and also emotionally close. So it's not just an understanding over the brain, but also over the heart. And then on the other hand side, I guess a good leader today is also an authentic leader. So these are two extremely important attitudes or assets you should have. And I guess that basically requires that you have access to both sides of vulnerability. So vulnerability basically, yes, one side, very positive, beautiful, wonderful, close contact to your heart. And then the other one, a bit the sad one, related to shame and fear, feeling excluded or maybe just not loved. And I guess to be an empathic person, you cannot just understand the positive side of life, the exciting stuff, when you are loved. I guess you also need to understand when you are rejected because maybe of your beliefs, maybe because of something else. You are rejected, you are not loved, you're excluded. In my life, and in my business life, private life, I guess I experienced both a lot. And absolutely, I guess if somehow possible, I would like to avoid those bad vulnerability. But I guess it's just part of life, of our whole life, and it makes us richer. I guess it lets us grow. So, yeah.
I think these are very wise words. We're actually coming towards the end of our conversation. It has been far too short. You mentioned one word, and if there are men watching this video, I'm imploring them, shaming each other. Let's stop doing that. When another man shows his vulnerability, listen to him, accept him, open your heart, and stop this behavior of trying to dominate and shame the other guy. These are very sensitive subjects, and we are scratching only on the surface, and we've spoken 26 minutes now with each other. So I don't think it would be actually presumptuous if either of us would think that we have found any definite answers to this, but hopefully our sharing, and I'm happy if you would share a little bit later on another story of your own life which revolves around vulnerability. But I'd like to come to a close, and I do want to show a video to you and to the viewers, which I like very much. And it is of great inspiration to me. It's a short conversation, a humorous conversation between Bishop Tutu and the Dalai Lama. They're not talking about vulnerability. They're talking about one of my core topics, reconciliation or forgiving in particular. Let's see what they're saying. Sorry if this takes a minute. There we go.
Forgiveness does not mean forget. You should keep memory about the other negative thing. But because of that, there is possibility to develop anger or hatred. That control, that is the meaning of forgiveness.
Almost natural response is when I'm hit, I hit back. When you have been refined, you put yourself in the shoes of the other.
It is totally wrong. The practice of tolerance and practice of forgiveness is signs of weakness. Totally wrong. 100% wrong. Or 1000% wrong. Isn't it?
Yeah, well,
No,
I mean,
this is forgiveness. It's a sign of strength. Isn't it?
absolutely. Yes, I was just going to say, those who say forgiving is a sign of weakness haven't tried it. Share the joy.
That's a good one.
Are you in?
Are you still there?
Yeah,
I've a lot-
still there, still
Yeah.
laughing.
Yeah, it's a good one. I need to get out of here. And actually, what they're saying could also be taken on vulnerability. Any man who hasn't tried it, who thinks it's a sign of weakness, hasn't tried it. If anything, it's a sign of strength, I guess. Arno, I would like to close this session, but I'd like to listen to maybe a few closing words from you. The topic we have is vulnerability. And while you speak, I will show the viewers your website where they can reach you at the bottom here in the ticker. And in the description on YouTube, of course, we will also have the website mentioned so that people can find you if they want to get in contact with you, be that on the topic we talked about tonight or as a Reiki practitioner or as a Reiki teacher, as the case may be. So over to you.
Yes, thank you. And I guess I would like to close with a short story. It's a father's story. Yeah? So in preparation of this art talk, I was talking to my son, explaining him, look, I talk about male vulnerability with René. And he said, what? But then basically said spontaneously about vulnerability. I'm very grateful that you as a father always talked about your vulnerability. So you talked openly, or I talked openly in the presence of my son and my wife about problems I have, fears I have, somehow that I am not a perfect person. And he said that was so helpful for him, that he got also the impression of an imperfect father. So also the father is struggling. Also the father does not always have answers. And in some cases, even the father has tears in his eyes. And he said the benefit, the strong benefit for him was that it took a lot of pressure for him from his shoulders, because yes, when the father is imperfect, I can also, as a son, I also can be imperfect, and that was very helpful for him. And I was completely not aware, and to a certain extent it's a paradox because I guess also normal father or parents' behavior is to avoid talking in the presence of children about fears and concerns and problems. So I would encourage every father, every mother to openly talk about their own vulnerability in the presence of their children.
That's a very wise completion of today's. I subscribe to that. My sons are 10 years older than your son is. And still today, we have a very open conversation about anything. And I believe also that is strongly rooted in their life experience of a father, just as you described. So I subscribe to what you said. And if there is a message out there for men and for women, because I believe it's very important also, and I hope that many women are watching this, that they have an insight in the struggles men have, for example, with vulnerability and talking to each other. It's something very important. You said open up to each other, particularly to your own children. And just now, as I was saying, I hope that women are also watching this. That would actually contribute to reconciling some of the damage male toxicity is doing and continues to do, unfortunately, and patriarchy has been responsible for such a long time. So I'm coming to an end. Thank you very much, Arno. I would like to wish you a good night, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much, Arno.
Thank you very much, René. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dear viewers, thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you will enjoy the next art talk as much as you did this one. And on our webpage, you will see that there is a number of other ones which we've already broadcast. Thank you very much for viewing.